which brings us to our next speaker, who is Geoff Cox from the Sheffield branch of the Green New Deal Network, who I first met, you know, when we were still allowed to travel around, giving an extremely compelling talk on citizens' assemblies, which really kind of convinced me, made me see the value in them that I hadn't seen before. And so I'm always grateful to Geoff for that. And I hope that he's going to do a similar kind of inspiring thing for us on retrofit and talking about the retrofit work that they're doing in Sheffield at the moment. I think we should also point out that he was a shop steward of the Bakers Union in the late 70s. So here we go, all things points to the bakers apparently. Please welcome Geoff to the Zoom stage.
Thank you very much. Can we start, Joe, with the first slide, please? There we go. So, yes, that's me. I'm going to cover a fair bit of ground quite quickly today. So I've put my email address in the bottom left there if anybody wants to pursue any of this in more detail. And perhaps we can put it in the chat later as well if you don't catch it now. So just starting with the basics, when we're talking about retrofitting, we're talking about improvements to existing housing. So that's primarily around insulating the homes and switching away from fossil fuels. So that's the decarbonisation benefit of retrofitting, the climate benefit. But there are a whole load of co-benefits that go alongside that. So we're creating warmer homes. There are public health benefits from not having damp and mould in your homes. It reduces fuel bills and reduces fuel poverty in the same way, and has the potential to create an awful lot of jobs, which in that kind of post-COVID economic recovery stimulus package is a great way to spend the money productively as opposed just for the sake of spending it to stimulate the economy. So that's my sort of introduction. Can we go to the next slide, please, Joe? Thanks. So I put this quote in, and I'll just give you a second to read it for yourselves. I've put this in to make the point that this is mainstream stuff. Nothing that I'm talking about is weirdo, nothing I'm talking about is fringe. This is absolutely necessary. The quote comes from the CCC, the Climate Change Committee, which is the government's advisory committee. So this is from the heart of government, if you like, and look at the date, February 2019. This is 2 whole years ago. So this is not breaking news, there's nothing emerging here. This is bog standard mainstream territory for government action under the 2050 targets. Right, so these figures are all taken from Sheffield City Region's document, which is the regional level of government that covers South Yorkshire. So I just want to talk about the scale of the task that we're talking about. So if we take that first bullet point, residential buildings are responsible for 1/4 of all South Yorkshire's CO2 emissions. Now, clearly, you cannot get your emissions down to carbon zero if you don't address the 1/3 of the sources. So that's how significant it is. For the next 2 bullet points, just look at the relationship between existing buildings and new builds. We've got about 2/3 of a million existing properties that exist now that are estimated to still be in occupation in 2040, which is the timescale of this document that I'm drawing from. But we're only building 4,000 to 5,000 new homes a year. So there's no way that the new build programme and the kind of knockdown of old buildings is ever going to get you there, because the numbers are too big and the rate of build is too small. The next few bullet points just give you some idea of the scale we're talking about. So, 500,000 of this, 500,000 of that, nearly 500,000 of something else. So just in terms of how we've been organising in South Yorkshire, we had our South Yorkshire Envisioning event in July 2020. We put about 10 different topics in front of people to see how much interest, well, partly to show the spread of the Green New Deal's ambition, but also just to see which ones people bit on, which were people interested in getting involved in. And retrofitting was the first working group that was set up following that meeting. 3 bodies contributed people to that: Green New Deal South Yorkshire, Sheffield Labour for a Green New Deal, and Sheffield Climate Alliance, which is like an umbrella group in Sheffield for a number of different climate bodies. We've been dead lucky in terms of the people we've had on that working group. There's about 8 core members. One's a retired architect, one's a current construction lecturer, one's a sustainable builder who worked for years at Machynlleth in West Wales, you know, the Intermediate Technology Centre. We've got 2 council candidates, that should be plural candidates, 1 Labour candidate and 1 Green Party candidate on the working group. So you know, we're nicely rounded in that respect. And this has left us with both insider and outsider routes available. So the fact that we've got Labour and Green Party candidates on our group allows, and especially the Labour one in terms of it being a Labour administration, it gives you access to cabinet members, to you can work within the governing party. But equally, if you want to make a bit of a fuss, you want to get the XR Samba band out, something like that, then you can do those outsider routes that don't embarrass the Labour Party members, because other parts of the coalition can get involved. So that's, it wasn't designed that way, it fell that way, but it was, you know, it's been really useful. Our agenda has shifted, which I'll describe in a second. So we haven't gone in a straight line, and we haven't gone as far as we would have gone. We've gone broader rather than further. But anyway, that's the way that worked out. The local elections came along, manifestos for local elections. So I personally have ended up in the position of being a Green New Deal South Yorkshire member, a Sheffield Labour Green New Deal member, a Sheffield Climate Alliance member. So I'm in all 3 camps. But I've been contacting the Liberal Democrats and the Conservative Party to try and get them to put Green New Deal policies in their local election manifestos, because we, under the Green New Deal UK banner, if you like, we want to popularise the notion, make people feel it's mainstream, make people feel comfortable voting for Green New Deal policies. So we've had to sacrifice, if you like, Sheffield specific or Green and Labour specific support for broader support. So that's caused some complications for me, which I can only handle by being very explicit with people as to what hat I'm wearing and be honest with people. And we haven't reached out to South Yorkshire as intended. We're still very much a Sheffield group, so we've just run out of time and resources to do that, really. So this was just an attempt to briefly take us through our pathway. Our initial scope, we anticipated that there would be central government funding for retrofitting. It would be part of a post-COVID government re-stimulus package. That kind of money tends to come in at regional government level rather than district government level. So our focus was on the Sheffield City region as a body, and our scope was South Yorkshire wide, because Sheffield City region's scope is South Yorkshire wide. And we were very agitated, we were very concerned to try and get the supply chain working, the training and skills, the housing stock analysis kind of planning of how would you do this, where would you start, what kind of demonstration projects do you need, that kind of stuff. So that's what we've started with initially. Just in terms of the things that we've taken on board and learned as we went, in terms of where do you go for best advice, the Green Building Council is the body that we ended up drawing our sort of lobbying materials from. There's also a group called Zero Carbon Yorkshire Buildings, which is a fantastic network as Calderdale's in Yorkshire. I won't go into this properly now to save time, but there are certain specifics, like about increasing insulation without increasing ventilation, that causes more trouble than it, causes things to get worse. There's a number of things like that that we learnt along the way that I could come back to later. But the idea that we needed to build pilots into the rollout for learning in terms of the technology, but also for demonstration to persuade people that this was a good benefit for them, that came stronger into our thinking as time went on. And the future homes guidance, at present, planning guidelines don't require new build to be made to the high level standards that a retrofit will be made to. So it is creating a situation where homes that are being completed now would have to be retrofitted after they've been completed as part of the retrofit programme, which is clearly a nonsense. So the future homes guidance now allows councils to introduce those 2025 standards earlier. So we built that into our thinking. And I've mentioned already about the local elections prompting us to think about how we can put these kind of ideas into manifestos for different parties, and to build in an idea that the Preston model idea, that you let the contracts on a scale that allows local businesses to apply for them. So if you say to people, you know, we need 500,000 houses done over 10 years, only like a multinational conglomerate can bid for something like that. You have to break it down to smaller packages. So the first bullet point, I think in our current situation, the technology is sorted. People know how to retrofit houses. You don't have to worry about that. The worry is the finance. Where does the money come from? As I say, new build being integrated, I mentioned a minute ago. The co-benefits are looming still larger at this stage with elections in view. This is a vote winner, and I think that's an important thing. This is a lot of things we talk about in terms of the climate. Oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. This is a vote winner, but budging the authorities along into getting ahead of the curve in terms of supply chain training and planning still remains an issue for us. So I think that's that. Thank you.
Thanks, Geoff. That was great. Really interesting to hear about like the kind of depth that you guys have gone into and kind of the things that you're looking at and thinking about. And I think retrofit is going to be such a key area as part of the green transition because of all those co-benefits of employment, of fuel poverty, or like stopping fuel poverty. So really interesting, and definitely something that we're thinking about in Calderdale as having way below average standards of housing across the area.